To another edition of the Tech Woke Podcast. To all those that need to know, I am your host, Christopher Akpala. I've been working in the RMF space for a while as an information system security officer. And in today's podcast, it's going to be a little bit different. In this podcast, we always talking about ISOs, GRCs, software engineering, different types of jobs like that. But in this podcast, we're going to be talking to Tonia Webster. She's been working in cybersecurity for a very long time. She has a lot of experience in PKI. PKI is a topic that people don't generally talk about. It's a skill that you can, once you learn it, you can work anywhere doing that skill. So without further ado, how you doing, Tonia Webster? How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm so glad to be sitting here with you and just talking about PKI and what I do and what I love.
I got you. I got you. So Tania, I'm glad we connected. You reached out. You said you been checking it out, and then we had a conversation. And it takes a lot just to shoot your shot, or you just try to see if you can connect with somebody. But when I talked to you and we had a conversation, you had a lot to say. You had a lot of personality, and it was just like, okay, this is a topic that nobody really talks about. I have experience working in public key infrastructure and things like that. So I'm glad that you came on the podcast.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
especially on a Friday night. So Tania, what we're going to talk about first for you, can you explain? Okay, how did you get into cybersecurity, and how did you get into the domain that you're in now?
Okay. So I've been in cybersecurity for well over 25 years. I started off as a sysadmin straight out of college, um, not having a clue about PKI. And back then, it wasn't talked about. So I started off building servers. I was a Windows OS person, um, dealt with uh, domains, building out domains and AD architecting and like I said, building out servers, working in data centers. And I want to say probably about 6 to 7 years into my career, I was working at a particular company and doing sysadmin work. And the manager just said, "Hey, we have this architect that we need to figure out. It's called PKI. Is anybody interested in learning it?" And no one really was raising their hand or was interested. So I said, "Hey, I'll take it." And that moment literally changed the trajectory of my path and my career in IT. And from there, I just literally got dove headfirst into the PKI world, learning. And I didn't start learning like certificates from the ground up. I kind of said, I say I went backwards because I learned how to architect first. And then I eventually figured out, okay, it's not just the architecting, I have to learn issuance as well. So it was kind of a well-rounded, backwards, well-rounded uh, career for me.
Okay, Tanae. So you're basically saying when you started working in PKI, you kind of had to rework, you kind of had to relearn everything, right? And work
Well,
from backward forward.
yeah. So the thing about PKI is, and I use this now or use this phrase a lot. PKI is one of those lanes in cybersecurity that intersects with IT and cybersecurity because of where it sits. So because I did sysadmin work for a while, I was able to build out the infrastructure pretty easily because I'd already been working with servers. So the architecting piece to me was easier because I was already architecting and doing AD work and things like that. For me, the learning curve was what actually is PKI and how is it integrated into the infrastructure once it's built. How are the certificates issued and things like that. So that was where the real learning curve for me came.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like people that work in the field, it can take years just to understand that portion. So when you talk about public key infrastructure, a lot of people don't know, especially in the government. Your CAT cards have something to do with PKI, certificates.
Mhm.
It's a lot that goes on with PKI that supplies the entire government, even outside the government, like your IDs and everything. So this is a very important field, and it's not going nowhere because it has to happen. Can you kind of explain from the bottom up, like what is PKI? Can you explain like what it is? What's public key infrastructure?
So literally PKI is the backbone of trust. When people talk about zero trust architecture, PKI is literally that. It is the infrastructure that allows you to verify trust, whether it's through certificate, through devices, people, uh, software applications, APIs. PKI is literally what allows you to validate the identity of what you're trying to communicate with. It's also built on cryptography. So when you talk about encryption and encrypted communication, that's what PKI is. It allows you to send encrypted emails, communication data to other people within your organization and outside your organization, and being able to validate and verify you are who you say you are. So it's not just, hey, I trust the person sitting across from me. It's I trust the organization that I'm communicating with outside.
Okay, so let me just put an analogy for the audience. And just for the audience, if you're on live, if you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, you have any questions at any point, just put it in the chat. At some point, we're going to get to them if you're trying to understand. Or if you work in the field of PKI or anything else, or you're an engineer, just put it in the chat. Just say something. Say something that we know y'all should there and keep it going. So when you talk about public key infrastructure, say is it and if I'm wrong, explain it to me. Say I'm trying to I'm trying to get into a fort, right? Say I want to get into the fort, and I'm saying, hey, I'm this worker. I'm Chris Akpala. I work for the army, whatever. So the dude at the door said, I don't know if you're that person, but then I show, okay, this is my ID. Is it kind of in that way, like a digital handshake?
Perfect. That's a perfect way of putting it. And I always, for people who don't know I like to use real world analogies to explain it, because there's a lot of acronyms and a lot of things that if you've never dealt with PKI, you you're kind of confused. Like, okay, what is she talking about? So, base analogy. Let's say I use a superhero analogy whenever I explain it. So I'm big into superheroes, right? Let's say you're a superhero and you have a power. You can't use that power unless it is validated by a higher authority to say you're able to use this superpower. But in order to identify you and validate you, they have to give you a badge. Okay. And that badge has to come from a higher authority. You can't just say, "Hey, I'm Tony and I'm a superhero." Okay? I don't care about that. Who's validating you? Who's vouching for you, right? So within a PKI organization, you have what you call certificate authorities. And those certificate authorities are essentially what validates your identity. And so when you equate that to an enterprise, we're going to go use your analogy. So you're trying to get into, this base, the badge that you have, it's authenticated all the way up to a root certificate. And that root certificate is trusted. It's trusted by other organizations. It's trusted within the organization, and it literally says, "I know who Chris is. I trust him. He's good to go. He can get into the base. He can get onto the servers." So it's literally about trust, identity, and integrity. And there's other layers, but that's when you talk about the base of what PKI is, it's literally about trust.
Okay, can you? So for my, this is for me. Is like, so can you kind of break down the public and private key, how they work? Does the public key unlock the private key, and does the private key unlock the public key?
Okay, so base foundation of PKI is public key, private key. So in order for me to send any type of encrypted information to, let's say, you, I have a public key and I want to exchange information with you. So I'm going to give you my public key so you can read that information. But in order for you to read it, you need a private key. You need another key to actually unlock, right, the encrypted data that's sent with that public key. Without that private key, it doesn't matter how strong the encryption is or what the message is. If you don't have a public key to actually unlock the encryption, you'll never be able to read it. So they work hand in hand. Um, and that's literally how the transmittal of information between encrypt when you're encrypting something, you have to have that private key on the other end.
Okay, and the certificate authority that's in between that, or is it kind of like,
So a certificate authority within a PKI environment, there's a hierarchy. So it's the same as if I call it the root of a tree, right? The root is what establishes trust. Okay. So any PKI environment that you go in, you're always going to have a root certificate, a root CA, certificate authority, right? That root CA will sign what's called an intermediate or subordinate CA. So it's always going to be a hierarchy. And the reason for that is you never want to leave your root CA exposed. Because if it's exposed and someone gets into your environment or your network, they now have access to every single key in your environment. So you want what's called a middleman, and that's your subordinate or some places intermediate. The intermediate is what issues all of the certificates on the bottom. And those are called entity certificates. And those can be device certificates, user certificates, digital. So there's always a hierarchy. And some complex systems might have a root at the top and then like an issuing certificate authority, and then they have other subordinate CAs. So the more CAs you add to your architecture, the more secure it is because it takes a lot more effort to get back up to the root.
okay, okay. So that's going to tie into the next thing we were talking about. Okay, but let me take this from Tassie. Tassie said something. I'm looking to get into GovTech, and every time I turn around, there is a field in IT I do not know existed. Thank you for bringing the area to the front row. Nah, thank you, Tonia, for coming on. Thank you for Tassie for checking it out. It's always something new, some things that a lot of people don't know about, you know. So thank you, Tassie, for watching.
And I know we're going to get into why it's not talked about. So that's definitely coming up.
Yeah, most definitely. And if you're on YouTube, if you're on LinkedIn, hey, just say something. Just say hi, how you doing? Drop a question, and we're going to get into it. And we're going to and ask questions because we're going to get into it later on. So Cynthia, a lot of people don't understand like how big PKI is when it comes to the internet. You know, even with CAs, and correct me if I'm wrong, like each CA is tied to like an IP in the internet if you're using it. And you can correct this. Can you kind of explain like how it works in the internet with HTTPS and things like that? Can you kind of break that down for me?
So one thing I always tell people is they're using PKI and they don't even realize it. Every single time you go onto the internet, you're literally using PKI because there has to be something that identifies a web browser to actually be on the internet. So if you go into, a lot of times you'll see a lock on, next to the address bar on your web browser. If you click that lock, you'll see a certificate, and that certificate basically says who it's being issued by and who the CA is that issued that certificate. So, great example. A lot of times, sometimes you'll go to a website and it'll say this site is not trusted, right? You'll get that big red X and it'll say, do you want to continue? What that means is there's been a break in trust. So either the certificate for the website expired, or the trust to the root CA is broken, or somewhere in the hierarchy. So the internet is basically telling you through that protocol, HTTPS, I can't verify who this website is. And it may be a valid website. It's just that the certificate is not being validated. So that's how it ties into the internet. And like I said, every single time you visit a website, you will see a certificate that is issued by the root CA of that company.
Okay, that's making sense. So we got a question real quick. So he said, who issues the key? I think you said the root CA or.
So not the root CA. So what happens is the root CA signs the intermediate CA, and the intermediate CA is what issues the key. And they issue it's not the key, it's the certificate. And the certificate has the key in it. And that's what allows encryption, right? So base answer, it's issued by the intermediate CA.
Okay. Hey, just want to let you know, everybody that's watching on, this is a lot of good information that you probably will have to pay for. So just make sure you listen, because I'm asking all these questions because it's helping me. So just make sure you listen, and then if you have any questions, just make sure you say something. So PKI seems like a very, very niche, and in me working in the field, it's like a niche community. Everybody I know that working in PKI always has a job. They have a job. Sometimes they stay at the same job for 20 years. So why is there not that many people that's in this particular niche in this field? And is it an IT role or is it a cybersecurity role?
So I'm going to answer that question first. I think that's where a lot of confusion comes in, and why you don't see a lot of people talking about PKI in the cybersecurity space, is because of where PKI sits. So most organizations, PKI sits on the infrastructure team. Like if you're working, every job that I've been in, it's always been on infrastructure side, but it intersects with security, right? So a lot of people feel like I can't get into PKI because I don't know the foundations. And honestly, that is true because of where it sits, in an organization. So I think the biggest thing, the biggest gap with why you don't see a lot of people in PKI is because there's no training. So with AI and cloud and DevOps and things like that, you can actually go out and take training courses, GRC. You can take long training courses, or even, if it's things that you already know and you just want to kind of capitalize and build on that skill, there's courses available. The only time you really hear about PKI is in the Sec Plus. And it's a domain within the Sec Plus. And it's a cryptography domain. It's talked about really quick. That's it. But if you actually try to go out and find true long-term hands-on training, you don't see that. So a lot of jobs that are posted or that are put out there, they're for mid to senior level PKI engineers, because they're expecting that you come into the door already knowing it, because there's no training to teach it. It's literally on the job training, which is how I learned it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, a lot of people don't want to touch it. You got to figure out. You might break something trying to figure it out. But
Oh yeah.
that's how the cookie crumbles.
One of the biggest things with PKIs, which I don't think people realize, is how many security incidences are caused because of certificates.
Okay. We got another question. So somebody asked, and then after this, we're gonna go to another question. Shade Roberts, she said, "Could you walk me through the typical day and responsibility of somebody in this role? Like, what do you do?"
Sure. So I always say that there's different levels of what that day to day looks like, depending on your experience level. So if you're a mid, I would say mid to senior, your day to day is going to be ensuring that the life cycle management of certificates is maintained. You're going to ensure that the the tool that is used, which there's several tools out there. One of the biggest ones out right now is Venify. That is a certificate life cycle management tool. It ensures that all of the certificates on your environment are in an inventory, right? So you want to ensure that that life cycle management tool is working efficiently. You also, honestly, you do a lot of work with other teams, ensuring that their certificates are installed on the right places. Like there's applications that use certificates. There's software. There's APIs. So it's not just, oh, I'm issuing certs all day. It's ensuring that there's honestly a level of teaching, a small learning curve for other teams that don't know anything about certificates. So they get a cert and they have no clue what they're supposed to do with it. So as a PKI engineer, you're going to help. Hey, okay, let's figure out where that certificate goes. I would say for an expert, and more so what I do now in my career is consulting. So going in and looking at the security posture of a PKI infrastructure. Is it where it needs to be? Does it need cleanup? Is there automation that needs to be put in place? So assessing that environment and then giving my recommendations and how to make that better.
Okay, okay, I hear you. I hear you. I just out of curiosity, what is like an entry level role in this pay, and what's the kind of like the expert level?
So there is no entry level for PKI. I'm gonna be transparent and honest. Entry level does not exist because well, let me rephrase that. If you were to find an entry level position, far and few between, it would be a PKI administrator, and that person would be the one to literally issue certificates. That's all they do. They don't do any back end work, but that's rare that you see those. um in terms of salary, so the more experience that you have, and you will find that most jobs are looking for 5 to 10 years of experience, at least starting off with 5 years. You can start anywhere from, I want to say, 120, 110, 120 low level, all the way up to 200, 250K.
That's a lot of. That's good. That's good. I had to pause for a second. I was like
I know,
250.
I noticed that. You got a little quiet there.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I can't. Some people can't even count. That'll take a long time to count. So that's good. Yeah, you can make some good money. You can.
Yeah,
It's a niche thing, so it's a good opportunity for people to do. That's what you're saying, right?
it's longevity. It's one of the things I always say with PKI, and what has honestly allowed me to have longevity in this career is it's not just certificates day in, day out. You literally are touching everything. You are touching cloud, you are touching DevOps, you're touching networking, um, architect, architecture, OS architecting. I was a Windows OS person for years. I had a job where I had to learn Linux because that's where the PKI architecture set. I didn't know anything about Linux. So I literally was able to add that skill, a Linux skill, to my resume. So I have been stacking skills over the last, I want to say, 15 years just by doing PKI, because of the things that I've been able to touch and learn throughout my career. So it's an opportunity to master PKI, but to gain other skills behind it.
Yeah, that's good. I did want to go back into PKI, kind of more of the technical about it.
Sure.
So with identity becoming a huge topic in cybersecurity, how does identity security connect with PKI and digital trust? Kind of break that down to me.
So identity is literally what PKI deals with. It deals with so many different machines, people, devices, APIs, software. All of those things have their own specific identity, right? Everything has something associated with it to say, this is who I am. PKI is what validates that identity. And it's what confirms that trust through certificates. So we are moving into a space where everything's becoming about machine identity now. And you have more machine identities in environments than you do humans. So how do you verify and ensure that you trust which machine you're talking to? Especially now you have automation, you have AI, all of that ties into a trust architecture. The base of that trust architecture is literally PKI because everything is being communicated and validated through certificates.
And that's even more reason why it has to be more secure because you can't really mess that up. If it goes down, I've been in work environments. If that thing goes down, and because you can lose certificates if it goes down too long, right?
So it's you don't lose them. What happens is, and this happens across organizations time and time again, when you don't have an efficient life cycle management and you don't have an ecosystem, a PKI ecosystem that's um, clear cut, that's clean. If you have a certificate that is expired or revoked or um, compromised, and it goes down, it expires or anything like that, it causes a security incident or an outage. I've seen where it has taken hours to figure out that it was a certificate because a lot of people don't realize how important that certificate is. And the thing with certificates is there is no grace period. So the minute it expires is the minute an outage occurs. So that could be at 1 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And now you're trying to figure out what happened. Where's the troubleshooting? And so that's why you need competent and skilled people who understand PKI, who can say, well, I think this was, let me go and look at the certificate that was installed on this application. Is it still good? Does it need to be renewed? Has it been revoked or anything like that? So that's where that skill set comes in.
Okay, that's interesting. I had another personal question. Like, so for example, say if you, a lot of times, a lot of systems that are running PKI, they don't usually do a lot of tech refreshes. For example, like say if you're like on a rail 6 or rail 7, they don't like to upgrade it because sometimes it can mess up their certificates, right? Like sometimes they can go from a rail 7 or rail 6, and if they move it to upgrade it, it can delete it. Is that true, or how does that work?
So that's a great question because it's not just like the OSs or things like that. So certificates tie into software, right? Applications. So it's also a big part of vulnerability management. And all of this ties in together. And I know you are an RMF guy. So risk management is huge in the certificate world because you have to ensure that when you do an upgrade for a server or an OS or anything like that, that the certificate is applied correctly and that it's, it's talking back to that application. So if the application is upgraded, you need to then go back and put the certificate on there. If you forget to do that, you're trying to figure out, why does my application not work? Because you forgot to put the certificate on there. So that's maybe where people are hesitant about upgrading, but that also creates vulnerabilities.
Okay, yeah, I got you. And like you said, going to Marmet background, that's why you got to remediate risk. How much risk are we willing to take? So you're supposed to do that, but I get sometimes you don't want to. It costs a lot. It costs money too to do all that. So I get where you're coming from on this. We got one question from, well, not a question, but a statement from Tassie. So to have security PKI certificate, you have to pay money to signing authority. I have an old printer and I was tired of using HTTP. So if I did a self-signed cert, which is fun, it still has a red line through it. I guess when you certify yourself, it doesn't count. Like printing, LOL, printing money like a doctorate. Yeah, everything's money. What's your thoughts on that?
So that's an interesting take on it, because what he's saying basically is, a lot of servers, you'll find in a lot of environments that servers self-sign. So what that means is they have nothing above them to say they are who they are. It's literally like he said, I can just go in and say, I have a doctorate. Okay. So who's verifying that you have this doctorate? I am. I'm a doctorate. That's literally what a self-signed cert is. There's no authority over it. So there's a difference. This is a great segue. There's a difference between an internal PKI system. Well, it's a PKI system is everything, but there's internal CAs and there's external CAs. So I'm pretty sure people have heard of DigiCert, GoDaddy. Those are external certificates that companies pay for to use within their environment. And then you have internal CAs that are built on their actual infrastructure. Those you do not pay for because you manage yourself. So once again, if you are building an internal CA, you need a PKI person that knows what they're doing to build it out. If you're paying for the certificates, even though you're not building that CA, external CA, you still need a PKI person to be able to manage where those certificates go and manage the inventory of them.
So the more and more you explain, hey, that's a good job to have. You're gonna if you're doing PKI, you're gonna be employed for a long time, and you can have multiple employments. And what after you learn it for a while, like Tonia. So Tonia, I have another question. So when you're getting into PKI and things like, what skills do you need to learn? From what you told me, you got to understand some Red Hat, some Linux, probably some coding. Like, just what are the baseline requirements to get in?
I will say I am not a coder, but I've learned coding because of PKI. So I will say foundational skills are key. So understanding OSs, even if you don't know Linux, if you understand Windows, going back to the internal CA, building out an internal infrastructure, that normally sits on an Active Directory environment. So you literally go and build a Windows server, and you add the certificate service roles to a server. That's infrastructure. Understanding networking, because certificates live on load balancers, F5s. A lot of times you're working with teams to open up firewall ports. So all of these skills, I will even say VMware, because a lot of CAs may live on a VM. So these skills, while they're not required, they get you in the door. So if you don't have the base IT foundational skills, it's not impossible, but it's harder, because now you're trying to learn on the job. And that's why you see a lot of positions, mid to senior, because they want you to have that skill set coming in the door. Coding is another one. Learning how to do PowerShell. It's not big coding, but PowerShell, Ansible, even Terraform for, on the cloud side. That's helpful. So anyone that's looking to get into it, I would say, yes, the Sec Plus is good. The Network Plus is good. But those are certifications. The foundation is, the IT foundations is what would really help.
Now, it matters a lot, and everything you're saying is real because I definitely, when I work in the field, I hear those terminologies a lot. My favorite one is F5. I haven't heard F5, F5 to F5. So trust me, I understand. Like everything you're saying is legit. And if you're watching on YouTube and LinkedIn, make sure you say something. If you have a question, comment, statement, just let us know you're here. Just give a hi. Hey, I'm passing by. I'm just checking it out. So make sure you're checking it out also, and make sure you leave some comments. So Tania, the future of digital trust with AI, cloud computing, and zero trust architectures for a lot of environments are changing. How do you see the digital trust evolving in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you think is AI going to replace us, or what's your thoughts on that?
So this is how I explain. I'm going to talk specifically for PKI. You will never have AI replace PKI. What you will have is automation, but you're never going to have AI replacing PKI because it sits on the infrastructure. You're not going to put AI tools on your infrastructure. So there's always going to need to be some type of human intervention. What the scale and the scope of specifically in the PKI realm, what I feel like that's going to look like over time is, because of the number of machines that are coming in environments, machine identities, you're going to have a lot more certificates that are issued at a higher rate. Certificates are issued by the billions every day. And so ensuring that your environment has automation. And right now, the landscape of certificates is changing. It used to be where you issue a certificate, it would be good for about a year, 2 years. Now, when you're looking at DigiCert and all of these third-party certificates, they literally are going to 47 days in the next couple years. If you don't have automation in your environment, you will not be able to handle the scale of certificates that are issued at the rate. So that's going to be key, is bringing in people that can build out automation for the certificate lifecycle management, from issuing to renewing to revoking. That whole circle of life with that certificate needs to be automated. You can't have someone manually sitting there issuing certificates all day. It's not feasible.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like automation, if you can come in and start automating, that's your niche right there. But yeah, that's interesting take, and I'm glad that you keep a lot of people that I brought on the podcast in general reiterate AI is not going to take over everything fully. It's still going to have a human element, no matter what you do, because we don't know the AI doesn't know everything. It's kind of dumb right now until it gets sentient. But I don't know. I don't know where we're going with that. So I did want to ask you about post quantum. Quantum computing is coming. Cryptography is coming. Um, we heard a lot about it. How do you think quantum will impact the PKI and encryption in the future, based on what you know?
So a lot of people are still trying to understand PQC, right? And it's huge. So basically, in the PKI world, without being super super technical, I'll try to keep it in layman's terms.
So
I'll keep it in layman's terms. So right now, PKI relies on the classic cryptography. Your RSA, your ECC, things like those. Those are cryptographic algorithms. And when PKI first started, those algorithms were fine because um, a lot of companies didn't think they could ever be broken. But over time, with the power of machines and AI and how hackers are using them, you're now a lot of companies are now realizing this is a real capability of being hacked. So PQC is what has been researched and is coming up in terms of being more powerful, a more powerful algorithm to implement. The problem is because so many enterprises and infrastructures are built on these classic algorithms, you can't just go in and change it. You can't just go in and start implementing PQC because so many things rely on these classic algorithms. So it is a phased approach. And it's how do I start implementing PQC without breaking my PKI environment? And I need to do it. It doesn't have to be done today, but it's something that has to be done over the next 3 to 5 years. And NIST, literally, I want to say last year, they brought out the standards for PQC so that enterprises can start planning how they want to implement PQC into their environment.
Yeah, and this is and audience, trust me, what she's saying is legit. That's the terminology I hear in the field, PQC. Breaking that down, there's a lot of vulnerabilities with that. So, an audience, I just want to emphasize it to you. This is some information you legit have to pay for. I don't usually say that, but people will pay a lot of money just for this information. So, make sure you're taking notes. Make sure you're taking you're saving information, going back, and make sure you're reaching out to Tonia after this if you have any questions. But so we're gonna go to some of the audience real quick. So thank you for the podcast. Thank you for watching the podcast. Thank you for checking us out and being there. Next thing we have is what is the downsides of PKI? And that's going to tie into a question I was just about to ask. What are some issues with PKI? I mean, it sounds perfect, but there's a lot of issues with it. What are some of the downsides with PKI?
I would say one of the biggest downsides is because there's not a lot of skilled um, professionals that are doing PKI, normally you will be the only person. Don't expect a team.
You are.
Don't ex-
That's fact. That's the
don't
facts thing you ever. That's facts. It's literally only going to be one or two people. I'm sorry.
absolutely. Throughout my career, I have usually only been one person or maybe a couple of us. But God forbid one of us get hit by a bus. Is you know, I literally have gone in and they said, "You're it. Tag, you're it. Figure it out." And because there's no other PKI people there, especially in the early stages of my career, it was like, oh my gosh, they're looking at me. The spotlight is on me to figure this out. And that's when you get in that fight or flight mode. You're in survival mode at that moment. And I think that's what makes you stronger and gives you more confidence because you do realize that people are relying on you for the answer. And there's no one else around you to ask questions and to ping things off of. So the downside is you are an island. You are on your own. And research, reading, asking questions. The biggest thing is figuring out what other departments are doing so you can understand how to get their certificates on their applications. But I would say that's the biggest downside.
Yeah, Antonia, like this is how you know she knows her stuff because I work on the time you're talking to one person, and that person has to know everything. And sometimes you kind of get in the God complex. Whatever they say is gold. So she ain't lying what she's saying. Like seriously, like it's just hitting me because I work in this space.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna get to some of the comments. Thank you, Tania. This is gold. PKI and PQC is going to be like IPv6 better, but we may never use it. I am really going to look more into this avenue. Make sure you check
Awesome.
her out. Check Tania out after this podcast and just, ask her any questions. We got,
Absolutely.
we got LinkedIn user. Thank you, Tania. This is very informative. Uh, we have Brisha De Leon. I'm sorry if I said your name wrong. She said, "How do I gain the skills?" We went over it a little bit earlier. We may touch on it just a little bit, but we definitely, if you want to check it out, just go back in the podcast a little bit earlier. You can definitely check that out. And also to everybody that's watching, remember, say some comments. We're getting towards the end where we're just going to have a free for all for questions. We're getting close to it. So just make sure you have your questions ready. We're going to definitely dive into some questions and things like that. And thank you, Tania, for being on here. Okay. So Tania, let's just talk about some of the things that you're doing. You kind of touched on everything I'm kind of looking for. So workforce development. So I just want to kind of talk about like your businesses. How do you help people, and what gap in the industry are you trying to solve in PKI?
So I have been doing this a really long time, and I realized I kept going to everybody else's table, and I decided to create my own table because it's so niche, and it's a blessing for me. Um, so I started my company Crown and Code as a consulting business to go out and say, help other companies that have this gap with PKI and give them solutions, help them get solutions on how to close that gap. But interestingly enough, the vision it 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 was added to. It didn't change. It was added to because I realized how many people don't know anything about PKI. And real world example, um, I was in a group and I asked a group full of 50,000 people about PKI. 50,000 people, no one knew about PKI, no conversations, nothing. That sparked the realization that this is an area that needs to be talked about. And then I started doing my research and seeing, okay, well, what training is out there to kind of point people to? And I realized there's not a lot of training. There's nothing out there to really give people hands-on experience with PKI. So I started CyberVisionaries Institute. And what that is a training institute that literally takes you through PKI from beginning to end. So right now I just started a 6-month cohort where I have students coming in day one. We're talking about private public key and how, just the foundations. And we're going to go through all the levels of foundation, operations, architecting. And it's about career alignment. It's not just about, hey, I'm going to throw a bunch of information at you and expect you to figure it out afterwards. It's let's go through this program and then I'm going to help you figure out how those skills transfer to what you already do and how we can help you pivot your career into PKI because it's so much room for people to grow in and get in, but no one knows how to get in there. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, man. Most definitely for the audience, if you're trying to learn that field, just make sure you check out her business. Check it out. It's on LinkedIn. Do you mind shouting it out one more time so the audience can hear?
So the training program is under cybervisionariesinstitute.org. The company itself is Crown and Code CyberSolutions. But for anybody that's looking for training, mentorship, anything that's going to help them career align, I'm all about career alignment. Cybervisionariesinstitute.org.
Okay, thank you for shouting that out. So I did have a couple more questions for the audience, and if you have in the audience, if you're there, make sure you have your questions ready. We're getting close to the end. What is some advice you would give somebody that's trying to get into cybersecurity right now? That's a lot of the audience. We have a lot of experienced people in here. If you are in there, experienced people, say some. But what was some advice you would give somebody that's trying to break into the field?
So one of the biggest things, and I have a mentorship program, and I always say this to my mentees: certifications are good, but they are not gold. What certifications do is they teach you how to take an exam. They teach you how to memorize knowledge. But how are you putting that knowledge to use? One of the gaps with people trying to get into the industry is they don't have a specific lane. Cybersecurity is like the ocean, right? It's huge, it's vast. There's so many areas that you can go in. But if you don't have a specific lane that you're focused on or something that you're interested in that you really want to hone in on, you will get lost in that sea. And then you'll end up with all these certifications and have no clue how or where to use them. So pick pick something that interests you. Pick something that you can really focus on, because once you get in, you will have the opportunity to learn other skills and to get those other certifications. But you got to get in the door first. And you can't do that on certifications alone. You need experience, hands-on lab. And I know people have been saying that across the board, but if you don't have experience in other jobs, how do you get it? You go out and you take the initiative and you do it yourself.
Okay, so yeah, that's some great advice. The way we're moving into cyberspace, even in the risk management space, you're going to have to learn technical skills, experience, things like that. Even with me in RMF Academy, also, like I have to, I'm working on hands-on labs, training. So that's the real way you're going to get a job because it's just the way we're going. You got to prove that you can do something. So I understand exactly what you're saying. So Tania, that was some great advice. Also, too, what's one quote that you use to kind of like get you motivated to always do this job, or can motivate other people that you want to share with the audience?
My quote for 2026 is: everything I do is with intent and purpose. Moving
Okay.
with intent and purpose. If it's not your purpose to do something, then don't make the intention. A lot of people look at things and they say, I want to do this, but is that really your intention to do it? And so then they get caught up, and you look up 5-10 years later and they say, that's not what I really wanted to do. So do everything that you do, whether it's in cybersecurity, whether it's in your personal life, you do it with intent and purpose.
And make sure you do everything what you're doing with intent and purpose, because even with myself, when I was getting into cybersecurity or just in life, period, I wasn't doing anything with intent or purpose. And I wasted a lot of time that I wish I could have taken back. 2 3 years of my time just BS and going to parties and doing things. At the end of the day, people, you got to take care of your life. So you got to do things with intent and purpose. And I just
Yes,
want to keep highlighting that. Yeah, you got intent and purpose all the
intent and
time.
purpose. Yes.
Yeah. So another question. Okay. So audience, if you're watching, we got people on YouTube, we got people on LinkedIn. We're again to the audience that don't know what's going on. We're talking about PKI. It's a hidden gem inside the cybersecurity IT space. We talked to Tania. She has over 20 years of experience in the field. So she's giving us advice on cybersecurity, PKI, explaining the field as much as possible. So if you're on live, if you're on LinkedIn and YouTube, we're gonna ask you some questions. Do y'all have any questions? Make sure you ask something because you might not get her. It's hard. The information you're giving is very valuable. You got to pay for. So if you have a question, please ask a question. Um, Tassie, he shouted out. He showed your websites, so check it
Thank you.
out.
Thank you.
Um, we did talk to Brissa earlier. Um, Tania, if you wanted to, you can simplify this as quick as possible. And she just want to ask how to get the skills to get into PKI. If you want to address it again.
I would say the biggest thing is get some IT foundational skills first. Start learning what the basics, what a private key is, a public key. Honestly, the CIA triad, which is used in RMF, confidentiality, integrity, availability, that's all part of PKI. So, um, I would say if you're interested, go out and look to see what resources are out there and absolutely hit me up. We can have a conversation and I can definitely give you some more insight into what you may need to do to start getting into the field.
Okay, so make sure you check her out and ask her some questions. But that's kind of where it's at in that space. I'm trying to add something. So, does anybody have any more questions? Again, that's a lot of good information. We're going, I mean, again, for people that just joined, we're talking to Nia. She's working public private key infrastructure. She's been doing it for over 20 years. She works in the government space. Does anybody have any questions on her, on cybersecurity, GovTech, anything that y'all want to ask? I'm gonna give it a minute. You sure you don't want to ask? Okay, any questions? Do I have any questions? I think I asked her all the questions. Anybody watching? Any questions?
Mm.
She said, "Yes, I have a master's in IT, but I'm having trouble niching down things." I, so,
Yeah.
you go ahead.
And that a lot of people who end up with degrees and certifications, like I said, going back to that ocean analogy, it's so big they don't know where to go. They don't know where to start figuring out what my niche should be. So my biggest thing is what interests you, because I can throw PKI out there all day, but if it doesn't interest you, then it may not be the lane that you're in. So it's what skills do you have, and where does how does that transfer into what your interests are? So yeah, it really, honestly, I will say this: having a niche and having a specific lane will get you a longer career in cybersecurity.
Yeah, I did want to answer this question too, Brisha. So I've been working in the space. The main thing I would tell you, you have to niche down. If you're a technical person, you like just doing your work and not be bothered. IT or software engineering is good for you. If you like to project manage and things like that, GRC might be for you. If you just like to break into things, investigate, maybe digital forensics is for you. Digital forensics or hacking is for you. If you just like to observe and monitor and track things, maybe blue team is for you, just vulnerability management. You just gotta go with what fits you and what you have an interest in, and then you'll grow. Like you said, Tonia been in this field for 20 some years, and she did almost everything you can do in this field. So, that's why I want to make sure, like, you might not get this again. So make sure you're asking questions. Nancy said, I just joined. I'm going to go back and rewatch. Yeah, definitely go back and rewatch, So it's a lot of valuable information that you can use to be successful in the field of cybersecurity IT. So we're going to give it a one last call. Anybody? Does anybody have any questions or concerns? Again, talking to Tania, it's very valuable. Governments and all these companies pay a lot of money just to talk to her and have a conversation, and she's talking to you for free. So if you got any last questions, we're going to wrap it up very, very soon. Anybody have a question for me, Tania?
While we're waiting, I will say this: PKI is in any and every industry that you can think of. Any and every industry. There is no, it's only over here, it's only over there. I say, if you go onto a website, there's a PKI environment in that company.
So you're always going to have a job. She's telling you that. You're always going to be employed. So just make sure you keep that in mind, everybody. Well, it looks like that's pretty much it for tonight. Thank you, everybody, for coming on the podcast. Thank you to Nia for checking us out. What I'd like to do on the podcast is just, I pray before the podcast. I felt it on my spirit to do one last prayer. So I'm going to just pray us out. To the Father God, thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for bringing Tonia here, bringing the audience here to talk about PKI and things that can benefit them. I pray that somebody in here has gotten something that it can help them. And I pray that this knowledge helps guide them to what they want to do. Thank you, God, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
And I think we got one last question.
I think there were two. Risa had another one too.
Oh, she said, Brisha was like, I'm looking around, I am interested, but I wouldn't know that AI will take over. Don't want me to choose the wrong niche. Thank you for all the info as well. Thank you for checking it out. Brisha, go ahead.
I was gonna say, IAM actually aligns a lot with PKI. I have a couple of IAM people in my cohort, and it's aligning to a lot of things that they already know.
Yeah. Brisha, make sure you just reach out to Tania on LinkedIn and see if she can help you out to have a conversation with her.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We have this dat 80. Great discussion. Thanks, Tania. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. We have Shade Roberts on YouTube. Since it's not an entry level, how long would it take to get in there? What's the simple blueprint to get into PKI?
So it just depends on your experience, what you have prior to, and what skills transfer into PKI. I mean, if you have IT foundational skills, it's a little bit easier. But there are some other things that would help. I can't really give a number on how long it would take because it's really about how hungry you are and how dedicated and how much effort you want to put into it. PKI is a lot of information, but once you start learning foundational skills, it's not as hard as people may think. So definitely reach out to me, have a conversation. We can talk more.
Okay. Well, we're going to end it. Tania, like I said, final thoughts. Tania, if you want to, you always can come on a podcast. I would want you to do more if you can, because I've learned so much, and I want to dive into a lot of good topics that you're talking about, like PQC. There's some other advanced topics we can definitely talk about, and I definitely would want you to come on.
Absolutely.
Just a little bit, just a little bit of information. You guys was like, okay, my head is hurting a little bit. A little bit, We got Mark Ray. He said, "Thank you for the knowledge and sharing." And also, too, if anybody's watching on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel if it helped you. If you're on LinkedIn, uh, follow, check out Tania. But I'm about to just end it. So remember, everybody, to check out RMF Academy if you want to learn about risk management framework. Check that out. We have some new things coming pretty soon. We're gonna have EMAS emulator in the future. We're gonna have some things that you can do some hands-on. So make sure you check out RMF Academy. But outside that, get 1% better every day, everybody. Peace out. I'll see you on the next one. Peace out, everybody. Have a blessed night and have a good
Thank you.
weekend.